Hey everyone, this is Cameron from Renegade Animation on renegadepopculture.com. If you like what we do, please give us a like and a rating on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you listen to podcasts. We are everywhere. That way we can keep doing what we love, and that's talk about animation. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your captain for this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
And today we've got a pretty interesting show. We've got reviews for Netflix's Spriggan, Vampire in the Garden, and Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. Boy, this is a very weird lineup.
Very different shows and movies.
So we're going to begin with Spriggan. This is a 6-episode limited series. Each episode is like about 45 minutes. Animation done by David Production, directed by Hiroshi Kobayashi, written by Hiroshi Seiko, and based on the manga by Hiroshi Takashige with illustrations by Ryoji Minagawa. Cameron, why don't you describe the plot of Spriggan?
It's interesting because Spriggan has kind of not a deep history within the animation and anime scene, but unless you're like a 90s or early 2000s anime fan, you probably saw the original movie, which was made by the ever amazing Studio 4C in 1998, and then it got a Netflix series that was recently released. It's about Spriggan takes place in the last years of the Cold War, where mysterious and unknown artifacts called out-of-place artifacts, or OOP art, are discovered in various parts of the world, leading to a secret war between various forces against the Arkham Corporation, an organization that places itself the guardians of the OOP arts in order to prevent them from being used as weapons. It stars our main character, Yu Ominame, and he's a high school student who does this secret job of working with the Arkham's organization and uses a super suit to pretty much kick butt and to make sure to take down the bad guys before they use these artifacts for, the forces of evil and such. Yu is voiced by Kyle McCarley, a 2022 adaptation. And maybe it's just because of recent things that are going on in the world. I found myself enjoying this show, but I wasn't fully in love with it as much as I feel like I should have been.
I don't blame you, because really my biggest hang up with this, as much as I love the concept of like anime Indiana Jones meets like Hellboy and sort of cyberpunk warfare, a lot of my reservations kind of come from the quality of the animation. This is a very unbalanced, not nearly as bad as like X-Arm, but like it's a mix between like 2D and 3D animation that doesn't always gel as smoothly as I'd like. At least when the show delivers on like the action scenes, it delivers.
I think my biggest problem with this show is the fact that it's 6 episodes. Each of them are pretty much an hour long, and there's no real over-connecting plot. It's very much a monster of the week kind of story where it's like every episode is our main character Yu going to someplace around the world and trying to get this artifact back from some organization. Like episode 2 has the American organization, or the 5th episode has Nazis. There's nothing really connecting them all. And outside of a few extremely minor characters that are at Yu's school who really don't add much to the whole world of Spriggan and of the plots, and one other side character that shows up twice, there's not much else. I was kind of hoping for something a little more meatier per se with the overall plot, because it is just like none of these items and artifacts connect to one another. And that was very frustrating to me because they do a lot within all of these episodes. Those 42 minutes are used pretty hit and miss wise with in terms of pacing. They would like introduce either these other Spriggan agents from like the French organization or what have you, and then they would never show up again, when it's like, boy, half of these characters would have been really useful in this other mission.
As far as like the whole villain of the week kind of formula, I wouldn't necessarily mind this so much if this were like a weekly program on Toonami or Adult Swim. I think the fact that this was released via Netflix's binge model, it doesn't really feel as satisfying. And also, as I've learned, there are like 11 volumes of the manga, and this feels like we're just barely scratching the surface in terms of the larger narrative. While I'm into a lot of the story, I feel like I've only eaten like a sample size as opposed to like a full 3-course meal.
Well, the problem is that there's this weird scaling of like stakes. Like, how serious are these artifacts? What's fascinating is that the second episode, where they are in like the Arctic or something and they have to deal with those American agents or soldiers, the ones like with the razor wire and the big machine gun and the psychic kid, that whole episode is the plot of the movie that came out in 1998. So they essentially retold the story from the film within the second episode and basically cut out all the meat. So, and the original movie, from what I recall, didn't even have that great of a plot. It was kind of like the same, like what this show was. It was going from location to location with very little through line. The action set pieces were great, and it definitely helps that the movie was done with pretty much mostly 2D animation, like hand-drawn animation, and it looked great back then. It still looks great. But when you're translating this story, it does seem like there needed to be something to connect everything. Because the second episode has like this artifact known as like Noah's Ark.
Yep.
And it's huge. It's like world ending. But then they go down, like they lower the stakes because it's like, oh, whoops, we went too big, to like an immortality potion or this literal crystal skull that's basically a magical nuke. And then it ends on the sixth episode on this ghost island, basically the Bermuda Triangle of islands. And after watching all 6 episodes, I was just kind of left hollow, because David Productions, their use of 2D and CGI, I don't think it's really all that bad. I think the issue is that like when it becomes noticeable that they're going between the two, it's really noticeable.
Yeah, the worst example was in episode 4, the Berserker. I would understand if the idea was that this thing is so out of this world that it like feels alien compared to like their environment, but from a practical perspective, it just looks like it doesn't belong.
And that thing feels like a bigger threat than, again, the inconsistent threat levels of these episodes. Then they try to like add more depth to Yu's character. Like they introduce all these side characters in the second episode only for them to get slaughtered, and you're supposed to feel bad. That's supposed to be the igniting trigger for you to go after that one American soldier. It rings hollow. I was just like, oh, you just needed something to do for the action set piece. Okay, whatever. And then like with the final episode, they introduce that Yu's old mentor, who also is a Spriggan and wears this other power suit armor that lets him have like a after image clone of himself. I was just wondering, like, why did they go this route? Are there supposed to be more episodes? Because it feels weird that they made only 6 of these.
Yeah, compared to the 11 volumes of the manga, it would be very unsatisfying if this was like all we got.
I'm trying to think of like moments where the story actually hit me, and I just can't do that. And a good example of this is the school setting stuff. It's so generic. You as the slacker student that nobody knows that he's, a secret action person. And then you got like the stuck up class president who's just like, you got to stay in school and get your grades up. Then you got like the shy friend who's there to be like, oh, don't be so hard on him. Then you got like this one girl in like, I think it was the Berserker episode where she's like, this is her last day and you should be here for her. And it's like, why? We barely know this character, and yet her leaving is like the biggest emotional driving point for you to get this mission done so he can be there for her last day. The movie from 1998 essentially put out the school stuff right at the beginning to have use ignition to get the plot starting with one of his friends basically blowing himself up. And then it's dropped. It's never brought up again. You never go back to the school. It's just you going on a globe-trotting adventure through some very nice, impressive animation sequences.
I always find it funny in all these anime in a school setting, like just how nosy the class president is. Like they care way too much about other people's attendance, their grades. It's one of those character archetypes that I will just never fully understand.
It's hilarious. And then it's just like they keep introducing characters that are really cool. Like you find out like the strongest Spriggan agent is this martial arts looking guy in the 5th episode. It's interesting. I want to really like this. This feels like such a throwback era kind of anime where you would get these on like direct-to-video releases and they'd keep making them until they stopped getting funding for them, because that's how a lot of OVAs were made back in the day. They planned them out to be like at least 6 episodes, and then sometimes the funding would fall through because of lackluster sales and mediocre reviews.
And then like instead of the full 6, you might get at most 3 or 4.
Sometimes 2. You better be lucky. I mean, that's what happened to Ninja Resurrection. Well, an anime about ninjas that was falsely advertised as being related to the infamous and very popular Ninja Scroll film.
Ooh, ouch.
And it had, I think, like 2 episodes, from what I recall. And the 2nd episode ends with the revival of Satan, and then it cuts to credits because they didn't get funding for a 3rd episode. So it just ends with the world going to garbage, man. The anime industry back then was wild. Well, it still is wild, but still.
It's a different kind of wild now.
It's not like this show couldn't have been great. The action is fantastic. It's well choreographed. David Productions knows what they're doing because they're also behind shows like JoJo Bizarre's Adventure, Fire Force, Cells at Work. Action can be their forte if they know what they're doing.
But how often do they utilize CG animation with their productions? Because this does kind of feel like, at least compared to those other titles, a little bit of uncharted territory.
They do a few. Like JoJo Bizarre's Adventure uses CGI at some points. Even I think one of the incarnations is absolutely like full on CGI. So it's not like too out of the ordinary for them. But it sure doesn't help that like there are moments where the compositing of the two doesn't quite work. Or like having a 2D composited on the CGI backgrounds, like that final fight on the pyramid.
Oh, yeah.
It looks a little clunky. And then those big stone statue things are obviously CG, and I guess you can say there's a little bit of like kudos of like, well, it makes sense they are statue enemies and what have you, but still I'm conflicted with how I feel about this show. I understand why it's popular. I understand what the story was going for. I'm just curious to know what the production process of this was, because if they're only going to get 6 episodes, 1, don't do a cliffhanger ending,
That really bothered me.
Two, if you're going to only have 6 episodes, why are you doing Monster of the Week plots? It's not like the 1 or 2 times you see reoccurring characters adds to anything. It's a shame. This was announced way back in 2020 as one of their stalwart Netflix anime series.
I remember that.
I mean, it was announced alongside Vampire in the Garden. Thus spoke Kishibe Rohan, Way of the House Husband, Yasuke. And it's finally come out. And there's just a bit of disappointment. And maybe it is, part of me is still kind of like miffed at Netflix with their recent shenanigans, or maybe it is just because of everything going on right now. I was disappointed with this one. I don't really recommend Spriggan unless you are a fan of the original film or the manga, or you just want to see some action.
I'm clearly more positive than you are on this, but I think we both agree, definitely not a perfect adaptation. Although good news for those who want to read the manga, apparently there's a new translation coming in August that'll be available. And I'm definitely going to try to seek that out because I liked a lot of what I watched story-wise, character-wise, right. And the action is especially incredible. So for better or for worse, invested in this world now. For the general audience, you just have to see for yourself and come to your own conclusions.
Give it a watch. I mean, as critics, we should be talking about like how we feel about a show or a movie, but also make sure you check it out for yourself. You might agree with us, you might disagree. There's definitely a lot to like about Spriggan. The action, the artifacts are pretty neat in some regards. The other Spriggan agents are a lot of fun. I loved the French werewolf character. Absolute scene stealer of that second episode. I wish we got more of him. And maybe that's because Yu is not always the most interesting character.
He does come across a little Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho in terms of just being a complete smartass, but still ultimately the one who saves the day.
He's not as interesting as Yusuke, or as Kurobaru would say, Urameshi. Give it a watch. Come up with your own opinions. Maybe you'll like it more than us. You'll definitely get a kick out of it with watching it for the action and the animation. But we'll have to see. Maybe Netflix is doing that thing where it's like, oh, look, we happen to have a second season. And it's just like, you absolutely just split up one season, but then said, we're going to make it 2 seasons and only pay for the price of 1 season. But, whatever. Hopefully that's not the case, but we'll have to see. It took years for Kingen Ashura to get a 3rd season, so who knows?
Anything is possible.
But now let's move on to the other Studio Wit Netflix collaboration, which is interesting that this came out after the more newly announced Bubble. I just think that's interesting. This was announced first, but it comes out after the movie. So let's talk about Vampire in the Garden. This is a original anime series for Netflix at 5 episodes. Amusing how we get these 2 different anime series from Netflix and David Productions and Wit Studios. And they're around the same episode length. Vampire in the Garden is directed by Ryotaro Makihara, assistant directed by Hiroyuki Tanaka. It's written by Ryotaro Makihara with music by Yoshihiro Ike. Essentially, this is a world where humans and vampires live, coexist. Unfortunately, it's a very fraught existence. The vampires want to feed off of the humans for their blood. I mean, they're vampires. What do you expect? You want them to drink tomato juice? There's been this ongoing war between humans and vampires, with the humans having this more industrial, weaponized, militarized state and community, while the vampires have a more, how would you describe how they frame the vampires? Because they definitely lean more towards the art, the agriculture, and some industrial aspects, but it's never like science driven. It's unlike the humans.
The vampires are depicted in a more Victorian era, old world kind of culture.
So we follow the relationship and bond between Momo and Fine. Momo is a human soldier who encounters Fine, a vampire princess, as they one day run into one another, bond, and then try to escape the opposing forces of both the humans and the vampires to find a way to live together and find a place where humans and vampires can coexist peacefully. I definitely like this one more than Spriggan, but I have the same number of problems as Spriggan. It's amusing because they both have kind of the same problems.
Yeah.
They just needed more time to tell their stories. And unlike Spriggan, where you could maybe hope for a second season or a volume 2, Vampire Guardian is just 5 episodes. That's all you get. And part of me wonders if this should have been a movie.
I was going to ask the same thing. In that regard, I'm wondering if that would have made this more visually appealing if it had like a feature film budget. Maybe it's just because a lot of the projects that we've seen from Wit over the past 2 years, and I know it's unfair I'm comparing this to Bubble, which looked amazing. This just kind of feels like something is missing.
What's amusing about this is that the episodes are shorter than Spriggan's. Like, these are just normal length episodes and stories and such. And yet, it feels like they are also rushing to get to the end of it all and to get to like certain story beats. Because if they were going the route of pushing like maybe an hour an episode or like at least 40 minutes, maybe that would have just been better. Just so you could have the characters who like let them breathe a little, let them relax instead of just feeling like they are constantly on the run and filled with dread, which is probably part of the point.
I was going to say, like, if the point was to constantly put these two in that state of dread, that there's like almost tragic urgency to their goal, which, as we learn, is practically unachievable given how deep into this war both sides are in.
This show introduces these little story world building details. Like, they come across an area where the vampires and the humans are segregated and they trade like gold for blood and what have you. And then there's like this corruption within the vampires about the distribution of blood. And by the time it starts to get interesting, the episode's over. And there's also like these, I kept getting like slightly Final Fantasy VI vibes from those mech suits that the humans would use.
Oh,
that are barely used, by the way. And of course, the show is very anti-war and like the humans and vampires should stop fighting and such. And the humans are more bloodthirsty because they use like guns and mech suits, even though the mech suits themselves don't actually protect the pilot as much.
If anything, it makes it worse.
Yeah, because then it's just like the vampires could just fly in and just crush them without a shield in front of their face. Then there's this, they drop like little history moments within some of the side characters, like that handful of soldiers, or I guess they were bounty hunters that were going after Momo, like the guy with the sword, the woman with the white hair and the rifle and such, who they also don't get a lot of development. That's really another issue with this show.
It's almost like laser focused on our two romantic leads, but then everyone else is like, oh, hi, I exist.
Like the last episode drops in a very tragic note for one of the bounty hunter characters before he dies, that he's just like, you don't get it. You will never be able to live with the vampires. And it shows that like he gets it. He fell in love with a vampire and was forced to kill her. And first of all, poor Fine, it seems like every other episode, she is just knocked the hell around by like
Seriously.
soldiers, rifle shots. She's a weakened vampire because she doesn't want to take blood. like drink it and such because of a past relationship she had with a human. A lot of this comes to a head when they get to episode 4, where they actually do encounter a literal Eden of peace among vampires and humans. Yeah, it turns out to be hot, wet garbage, where you find out that they capture vampires that are addicted to blood and use their regenerative powers to make electricity happen, which is so messed up that like the vampires were like, yeah, we'll sacrifice a few of our kind to make this happen. And it's just like, that's not what a Eden or a utopia is, which of course is the main vocal point of like a false equivalence of what a peaceful utopia would be. Even though like I liked the focus on Momo and Fine, by episode 5, just because of how the episodes are structured, I was kind of getting done with their drama.
Let me guess, you wish they either like got their happy ending?
No, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I wish these characters would just die. They weren't unlikable. They were likable. Even though if like Fine had the issue of getting just like all the shots, and Momo had the exact opposite of just like getting pushed into the background because Fine didn't want her to get hurt, even though Momo can defend herself.
She is a soldier after all.
And she does get a few licks in. It's not like Momo is a lesser character. But after a while, it was just like, I was ready for something else to happen with their relationship. Either take it to the next level, or what we see in the 5th episode, the tragedy of it all. It does technically end on a happier note, where the humans and vampires are finally coexisting in this one area.
It is a nice attempt to end this on a happier note. I agree with what you said, that like the pacing for the show was just rushed.
The romance between the two characters is complex. The world around them is dead simple in execution. There's very little to make it feel as complex as they want you to believe it is. And again, either make more episodes or make this a movie, like with a 2-hour runtime, and just like focus on the main characters and have them like have moments where they can be romantic with one another or something like that. When the show is focusing on them and the mood, the atmosphere, and the amazing music, the music is probably hands down the most consistently great thing about this show.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Yoshihiro Ike does a fantastic job with the music. He's done music for stuff like 2019's Dororo and like a lot of anime. Just like, oh my gosh, so much anime.
His credits are massive.
Like he's done work for like Be the Beginning, Inuyashiki, The Great Passage, Tiger and Bunny, Tack Off Destiny, which that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Knowing that he did the work for that one. And then like, I will admit the tragedy at the very end where, spoilers, Momo is resting Fine on a field of flowers was really touching. My heart was pulled at that scene.
Oh, same.
I just wish it was consistently like that at the end. I don't know what happened here. Like maybe they just had a great idea and then they just didn't quite know how to execute it, or they were maybe struggling to either make it a movie or a limited series, and then Netflix is just like, make it a limited series, and then they just didn't know how to pace it out. Because it's not like our director Ryotaro Makihara doesn't know what he's doing. He's got a lot of credits. Like he's worked as a key animator for shows like Monsters or film like Summer Wars, or did work on like Tatami Galaxy, the show that was a pseudo prequel to the Night of Short Walk On Girl.
He has that experience.
And he's also done directing work, especially for Wit Studios. Like he's done Howl, which is his charming little hour-long film. He's done like Shisha no Teikoku. He's definitely more of an animator guy who hasn't done a whole lot of directing, so maybe that's why it feels like there are some missteps here. I would like to see him direct more to see what he could do if he was given a much more concrete idea or way of executing the story. But this is definitely one of the few Wit Studios productions where I would kind of put in the middle. not their best, but not their worst.
I think that's fair.
And it's a shame, again, like also like the voice cast is really good. Like Xanthi Hyun, who voices Momo, is great. Larissa Gallagher is great as Fine. You got Paul Castro Jr., Lipka Shah, Connor Fogarty. The English dub is great. Do you have any other thoughts or maybe closing thoughts about Vampire in the Garden?
Final thoughts on Vampire in the Garden is basically it's a very interesting series. If you're looking for something in like that dark fantasy genre that's like kind of a period piece, but also has like some interesting commentary on warfare, like the different cultures, or you just like vampires and you will consume any vampire medium, I would say give this a watch. It's certainly not my favorite Wit Studio production, but I've seen worse.
I would like to definitely give it a recommendation if you're into like gothic romance stuff, because the romance stuff is great. It kind of fumbles maybe a little bit in some areas, but it's easily the strongest part of the show. So if you're into that, then give it a watch. But otherwise, it's definitely not high priority, which is a shame. I usually love and am excited for Wit Studios produced work. Like Ranking of Kings is great. Spy X Family's great. Vivi's great. They're a good studio. I'm always going to be on the lookout of what they're doing. But now we got to get stupid. And I mean, like cataclysmically, otherworldly, universally stupid.
Yes, we get to talk about Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. This is not directed by Mike Judge. He still does the voice for our main characters, and he wrote the screenplay, came up with the story, and voices like a bunch of other voices. So the plot for this one, blasting off on a NASA space mission in 1998, mischievous best pals Beavis and Butthead time travel to the year 2022. As the NSA and US government try to track them down, the clueless teens do their best to adjust to modern life. So remember a couple years ago when we were first kind of discussing the news that Beavis and Butthead was coming back for a second revival? And we both kind of had our reservations.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this, and the interesting thing about it, it's such a time capsule of a show. It was very much during a time period of when MTV was actually about music. Then it's like they tried to update it and bring it to a new audience. Didn't go well.
I think it barely lasted a season.
Let me check that out. Oh, wow. It didn't last long. It went from October 27th, 2011 to December 29th, 2011.
Yeah, like 2 months.
They had 22 episodes, which is not bad, but it sounds like they were. That's the thing. I don't remember half of these or hearing anyone talk about the 2011 continuation of the original show.
I've seen literally one episode and I don't remember much. I just remember it feeling very off compared to the original run.
Yeah. But of course, you know, nostalgia is profitable. Industry people, higher ups don't want to risk on anything new or give support to anything new or original or told differently. So they made another movie, which is kind of interesting because Beavis and Butthead Do America was a real surprise, I think. A lot of people were kind of caught off guard about it. I still remember seeing the Siskel and Ebert segment talking about this film, and they were just in love with it. And I think that caught me off guard. I was like, whoa, so this movie based off of a TV show is actually good? I
watched it earlier this afternoon, and honestly, I was just having a ball going back and watching what is essentially a snowball of insanity that begins with Beavis's TV getting stolen and ends with like the FBI and CIA all going after them for like a detonation device or something.
Yeah, because they get involved with some homegrown American terrorists. They were going to Washington, and of course, Beavis and Butthead, being the stupid, horny teenagers that they are, were promised that they would score. Well, it ends up with them saving the USA through the most absurd in absolutely silliest of ways. Through a road trip, a peyote drug experience. It was just a lot of fun. You would think that Beavis and Butthead would not translate well the feature length, and you would definitely maybe have to be a fan of it to fully get the appeal of like the clunky visuals, the low-key humor, the absurd dumbness of our main characters and such, and how everyone treats them like they aren't some weird abstract oddity within the human realm.
They look like aliens compared to like the other humans in the show. And in Do the Universe, they do make that joke like once.
And I was curious to see about this new movie because when he announced it, it was just like they did that cute little teaser of Beavis and Butthead announcing the movie like over a Zoom call, but it turns out that they're sitting right next to each other on the same couch, which was a great joke. I like that one. But it was also the fact that Paramount Plus wasn't really impressing me with their content, and they still kind of aren't. But I still need to check out like that Star Trek Prodigy show and some of their other exclusive stuff. But when I sat down to watch this movie yesterday, I was amazed from beginning to end that my final thoughts were, am I really going to put a Beavis and Butthead movie above Lightyear? Yes. The one thing I really love about this movie is the plot is kept light. They don't try to overcomplicate it. Beavis and Butthead accidentally cause a science fair to go awry and burn down the whole building when they're at the courthouse. And the judge is like, Beavis and Butthead, everyone finds you guilty. They're like, oh, right. And it's like, no. And then the judge was like, I've been told I am an extremely strict judge. And then I saw Touched by an Angel. And I was thinking to myself, these two young souls, I don't see them as a problem. I see us as the problem of failing these two. And it's like, oh my gosh, are they really going to let these two get away from being thrown in jail? And then they go to space camp. And then because they are incredibly juvenile, they are at this like section where they're putting like this rocket thing inside of a part of the satellite and such. And then the scientists are like, oh my gosh, these two are prodigies. We have to send them to space. Even though that's a cataclysmically terrible idea.
The worst idea any human could think of.
And what's so great about the comedy of this film is that everyone else, they played their roles completely straight.
Yep.
They're acting like this is a normal, like, pseudo-serious King of the Hill or a drama of some kind, like a political thriller or something. I mean, of course, with the few quirky comedic lines here and there that break up the self-serious tone, but Beavis and Butthead never change or break character. They don't instantly become smart at one point. Even the smartest alternate universe Beavis and Buttheads, while they have more of a vocabulary, are still just as stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, what did you think about like the humor of the overall like experience of this film?
I will try my best not to compare this directly to Do America, but it's hard because when you really boil it down, these two movies do kind of follow the same formula. It starts with the two of them getting in trouble, and then it just spirals completely out of control. I love Mike Judge's sense of humor. I've been describing his comedy as smart, dumb comedy.
It's like the Adam McKay way of doing comedy, or how he used to do comedy, where a lot of his films like Step Brothers and such had very dumb humor, but it was well written.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what helps here with Mike Judge. He didn't try to fit a square peg through a round hole. He gave you, along with his other writer, Lou Morton, who worked on stuff like News Radio, Family Guy, Futurama, Saturday Night Live, and such. They give you what you want out of Beavis and Butthead in terms of humor. Just everyone playing it straight-faced, and Beavis and Butthead completely misunderstanding the situation they are in, but still somehow find a way to make it through.
I think one of like the funniest scenes when they stumble into a gender studies lecture at this college.
Oh, yes, and it has Tig Notaro as the professor.
Which is just perfect. They stumble into this gender studies lecture. The professor is explaining the concept of white privilege. And not only does the message like not like get to them at all, but they learn the complete wrong message. And then following that is just them just like absolutely annihilating the campus.
Everything in their path. They're just like, get out of the way, butthead. We got white privilege. And they just like go through a cafeteria, go through a bookstore. And then they're just like, we're an anomaly of the situation. It's like, no, you're not. You're consistently reinforcing it. There are definitely like was a little bit of a worry. It's like, oh no, how are they going to handle this humor? First off, Tig Notaro as a professor, great. She knows how to have that, like the right amount of comedic execution for a professor, like for this situation. She's like, okay, these two are just brain dead morons, but I can work with this. I think my favorite little joke that I forgot happened here was when one of the female students is describing white privilege, and then a guy mansplains like the finishing bit and then takes the credit for the explanation of what white privilege is. That was such a smart little jab at like mansplaining. It's so good.
The visual gags in this are just so well done.
They are so creative. And while there's definitely not a peyote eating scene where it just goes like crazy with the visuals, the humor is still very consistent. Like I love when they meet the smart alternative universe, Beavis and Butthead, and they're trying to explain to them like, we're from an alternate universe, one that's similar to yours but different. And they're like, what? Did you see that cartoon Spider-Man movie? No. Huh. Would have been a lot easier way to explain the situation if you have. Or like how, again, they're the smartest versions of Beavis and Butthead, but they're still stupid where they're like, we put this portal that you need to get through on Mount Everest because it was closer to space. But the trip was a longie, so we moved it over to there. And then by the end of it all, they're like, we kind of thought this whole time you two needed to go through the portal to save the universe. But it turns out that anybody could have gone through. We could have even thrown a brick. Like, whatever this film has lacking in terms of, like, a real comprehensive plot or, like, emotional heart to the story, it makes up for it with laughs. Probably some of the most consistent laughs this year so far in terms of just movies and animation in general.
Even when they try to have some sort of like emotional centerpiece, like they do the thing like at the start of the third act where Beavis and Butthead kind of go their separate ways, but then are like immediately captured.
I love the sad separation sequence where you think Butthead is looking at these two people getting engaged. And then it zooms in on the window and it's Butthead looking at two ladybugs humping. And he's like, hey, Beavis. Then they're like, wait a minute. I think that we don't have the key. We have to go back in there and put the handcuffs back on ourselves to get the key. Beavis and Butthead are continuously stupid. They are doing everything wrong. They're driving backwards. They're misunderstanding everything around them. But everyone else is like, these guys must be some mad geniuses. Or like when they're driving backwards, one of the FBI people goes, I heard Germans train their drivers to drive backwards so their snipers have like the best view possible. And of course, it's just Beavis and Butthead driving backwards because they're stupid. I think this film works for like pseudo 90 minutes. I'm glad that they don't try to fill out like a 2-hour time limit. I think 80 to 90 minutes.
It is the sweet spot for these movies, because if they go any longer, then they kind of have to put more effort into the story.
You're not there for an intensely emotional and complex experience.
You're there for a farce. And this is like, it's a very old school style of humor, but clearly this is like set in like a modern world.
Yeah, and they don't change much. They don't add in too many pop culture references or try to modernize the humor. It's just throw Beavis and Butthead into this situation and see how everyone else around them reacts. And that goes along the line with how Mike Judge and his team casts these stories with these characters, because they don't do like a Simpsons thing where they have like a celebrity pop in just to be themselves and say a funny line and then that's it. Like this one doesn't have like a super uber amount of well-known names, but they still have like Mike Judge, Gary Cole, Christy Amantopoulos, Matt Faison, David Herman, Brian Husky, Chi McBride, Tig Notaro, Stephen Root. He's the jail tattoo artist. He tried to talk Butthead out of putting a butt on his forehead. I love that sequence where he's just like, don't you want like a pair of dice or something instead of a butt on your forehead? And Butthead's like, it's going to be there forever, you idiot. And it's just like, okay. And then there's Andrea Savage, Martin Starr, Jimmy O Yang, Toby Huss, Phil Lamar, Tox Gundoye, Zara Fazal, Ashley Gardner, Mary Birdsong, and True Valentino. They do a good job, and they like Tig Notaro isn't just playing Tig Notaro. She's playing a character. Mm-hmm. And that's what I always liked about like Mike Judge's shows like King of the Hill. It was never about the celebrity. It was about what that celebrity could bring to a specific character.
Exactly.
Like, yes, Matthew McConaughey playing Boomhauer's brother is kind of like the easiest casting you could ever do. But they don't just say, oh, my brother's Matthew McConaughey. It's an actual like brother and such. I get that same vibe and energy here with a lot of these casting choices. I liked everyone. I think they were all pretty well casted. Now, as for the animation, I know some people are disappointed with the more polished look of everything, but I did notice a few little details of how they handled the character movements of Beavis and Butthead. They still made it look like they were still like hand-drawn every time, like the hair like on top of their head changes positions from time to time.
There are other characters who look a lot more squiggly, I guess, in their design, kind of like old school adult animation from like the 90s.
Right. But it does look good. I mean, there are definitely parts where they were given a little more time to hand draw these moments to like, spice it up. And there are definitely moments where you can tell they're doing more puppet animation. But it never felt like it was distracting. It's not like how some adult animation can be like that, where it's like, oh, wow, they put a lot of money into this one sequence. And then everything else is just move here, drag there kind of way of animating using like computer-driven 2D animation.
Right.
And such. It still looked pretty much like a Beavis and Butthead show. It didn't feel like they tried to modernize the looks, even though they did that kind of amusing CGI look to the characters at the very beginning.
That was a fun intro,
and it didn't look that terrible also for what it was.
Yeah.
And I mean, it still looked pretty good in general. Maybe I wish they could have done something in similar vein of the peyote drug sequence from the first film. But I did catch like some of the details of what like, oh, this kind of reminds me of like what shows like Super Jail did with their animation and violence and what have you. I did love that dream sequence of Beavis with the astronaut then turned governor of Texas. She turns into like this Xena warrior princess character at the end, and then they get on a Pegasus, and then the Pegasus turns out to be Butthead, and then he's like,
I'm a deer.
That part cracked me up so hard just because it's so ideal of what Butthead would say.
Yep.
Even though the emotional moments weren't ever going to really work out for characters like Beavis and Butthead, I did kind of like how they gave Beavis a sort of existential crisis of who he is and what his friendship with Butthead is. Even though at the end of the day, they're not going to score, which is apparently the one consistent thing throughout all the universes, is that Beavis and Butthead never score once.
Of all the multiversal consistencies, that's what unites them all.
And they're just like, whoa, maybe we're going to be the first ones to score. And then, of course, turns into like, and the smart Beavis gets like a medal at the end, where it's just like, congratulations, smart Beavis, for being the first one out of anyone here to score. And for you, Butthead, you got to watch while inside a suitcase.
Which is like, wait, how?
How? Yeah, I know, with all these designs and such. I mean, it's a lot of fun. Maybe you can say that the story wasn't as strong as Do America, or, just not strong in general. But at the same time, you're not there for art. You're not there for like a Disney film. You're there for the goofs, for the laughs, the shenanigans. That's what they deliver. That's why this film, even though it might have the weary stench of, I don't know, it's a streaming service original movie. We kind of seen how mixed they can be. And here this one is, and it's great. It's like one of the best animated films of the year so far.
Yeah, it's just outside my top 10 for like the year overall. But as an animated film, this is honestly like top shelf. After watching this, I'm no longer worried about the second series revival because I know two things. I know, one, that Mike Judge still has the comedic chops, both as a writer and as the voice of a million characters. Visually, I don't have to worry either because this movie looked great. If Titmouse is involved in like the series proper, then I know they're in good hands. My one criticism, this is really just like a personal note, that's by no means a deal breaker. I wish the soundtrack was a little bit more memorable. That's always been like a cornerstone of Beavis and Butthead. But I also understand that pop culture has changed significantly since the 90s. MTV is no longer like in the forefront. So obviously things are going to be a little bit different for like this new generation.
John Frizzell does a good job with the overall composition of the film, but it is definitely like not as memorable as like the soundtrack to Do America with all the rock music and such. And I am a little worried about how this will unfold, just because not as much after the recent announcement of them remastering all of the old episodes of Beavis and Butthead, including the music videos.
That does give me a little bit of hope for the revival, because if they're going through that length to restore the original series, then it means that they're taking the revival seriously.
All they really need to do is just follow this movie as a template of like, why do people watch Beavis and Butthead? What makes them so appealing for back then and now? I don't know what it is. And maybe it's just because of a certain mindset has changed. But these TV shows that get movies, like how we had 2018's Teen Titans go to the movies, and how this year alone we had the Bob's Burgers movie. It's like they cracked the code sort of how to adapt these shows into feature-length formats. Granted, I say this after last year's disaster that was Tom and Jerry, but understanding what happened with that production, you kind of get why it was such a mess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you just need the right people to know how to bring these kind of past generation characters to a modern audience without sacrificing what made them popular. And if you're going to bring them on to film, it's definitely kind of a challenge, but you just can't really break the one rule about Beavis and Butthead, and that they are just not the brightest bulbs in the kitchen. Now, like, maybe I could nitpick a little, like the side characters and the villains are not all that interesting, like Jim Hartson, voiced by Nate Faxon. Like, he's great and he's fine, and he gets a few reoccurring gags where he's just like, I'm also just as important, when he's not actually as important. Like, they aren't the most interesting, but I did like their dialogue. Like, I loved when Beavis and Butthead are like, we want to score with you. And she's like, oh, Lord, wouldn't be the worst thing I did to gain power. Just because of, politicians and such. Yeah, they just made this one work. It's in my top 10 for at least right now. It's at number 6, while the Bob's Burgers movie is at number 5. I think I like the Bob's Burgers movie a little more, just because it has a touch more of the heart that makes that movie special, while Beavis and Butthead, due to universe, is maybe the more watchable of the two. I don't know. I like both of them.
The difference is in your own personal sense of humor. If you lean more towards like the wholesome sort of like quirky optimism of Bob's Burgers movie, then that'll probably be more up your alley. But if you're a Mike Judge fan and you have been like waiting for this movie forever, then I can see you just falling head over heels for this.
Yeah, I hope it gets a Blu-ray release. I know the first movie got one, and I'd like to own both. I think I would like to check out this new iteration of the show just to see what they will do. Paramount Plus kind of needs it because they've tried one adult animated series so far, and it just failed on them. Yeah, we'll have to see if people show up for another Beavis and Butthead show, since they really didn't show up last time. But who knows? Maybe they'll crack the code and give Paramount Plus one of their big non-live action hits and, give them something else to watch that's not Star Trek.
I hope so. I'm very much hoping that the positive reception for this movie kind of emboldened audiences to give this new revival a chance, because maybe the problem was just the audience back in 2011. At that point, MTV had like moved on from Beavis and Butthead. It just felt completely out of place. Maybe Paramount Plus is just a better platform for a revival.
I think that's going to be where the audiences are going to go. That's why Clone High moved to HBO Max. And now, would you have liked to have seen this new Beavis and Butthead film on the big screen?
All things being equal, I would love to see everything on the big screen. Yeah, I think I would like to see this in theaters.
I think I would have too, but I also felt like it worked really well on the small screen. But, a good movie is a good movie.
Exactly.
Wasn't obvious. We hated this movie. No, I'm kidding. We loved Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe, and you should absolutely get like either a free month or sign up for a trial for Paramount Plus just to watch the movie. Hopefully it gets like a Blu-ray release sometime in the future, but we'll have to see. Good job, Paramount. You put on like one of the first few exclusives on your service that I absolutely adored.
Yeah, same.
But that's just me. I'm not much of a Star Trek person, so I wasn't really drawn to that stuff. I wanted to see some of their other like SpongeBob, Nickelodeon reboot franchise stuff. I wanted to see them. Like, I was curious to see how this one would go, and it succeeded. So now for recommendations, we are able to finally talk about this, even though it's been out for a few days now. I'm going to recommend that G Kids re-released 2 specials that Isao Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki worked on. They're called Panda Go Panda. These were some specials that they worked on back in the 70s. This was when Japan was going through a huge like panda craze, like back then. Released, so 1972, during the height of the panda craze. It's kind of like how, I forgot which country in Europe had tulip fever. I think it was Sweden, if I remember correctly.
It might be.
These 2 specials are about a young girl who encounters a baby panda at her house. And then the papa panda arrives there and ends up living there with the young girl. And a little bit of an interesting history of these 2 specials. The main girl that you see,
she looks a lot like Pippi Longstocking.
Yeah, that's because they were trying to get a Pippi Longstockings adaptation off the ground. And unfortunately, the author of Pippi Longstocking said no. And we did get a Pippi Longstockings direct-to-video film, like, I think during the 90s. I forgot.
I remember seeing, like, previews for that on old VHS tapes. I never actually watched the movie, or if I did, I barely remember it. I just remember, like, the trailers for it.
Yeah. But man, that's a shame. It would have been great to see Miyazaki and Takahata handle Pippi Longstockings. Now, they made 2 of these Panda Go Panda specials. There's Panda, Baby Panda, and then there's Panda, Copanda, or Baby Panda, and the Rainy Day Circus, where they encounter a baby tiger. And they have to take the tiger back to its mama at the circus. One thing you do have to go into with these 2 specials, you cannot take these stories seriously.
Nope.
And I mean, do not try to go in with like, I'm going to nitpick this thing for internet clout. these specials are not meant to be taken seriously. They are approached, written, and made with the mindset of a child. How would a child react to seeing a baby panda, or if a panda lived at the house? That's the approach. And that's what brings a lot of the charm, that everyone's just like, at first, like, okay, whoa, there's a panda here. But then by the end of the two specials, they're just kind of like, neat. We live with a panda. A panda goes to work on a train. The panda works at the zoo. And they live with this young girl who lives by herself while her grandmother is continuously away from everyone. I don't know what happened to her or where she is by the second special. She just does not really show up again.
It's almost like she just shows up in like the beginning just to establish the fact that the girl lives on her own.
The grandma shows up once more, but it's not really about her. It's about putting the pandas on screen. That's why a lot of the runtime is just the panda shenanigans with the young girl. The young girl trying to act like the mama to the baby panda, which I know some people might be like, that's kind of odd. But it's also like, have you never seen like a little girl hold like a baby doll?
It's exactly that kind of concept.
Yeah. And while these are TV specials and Miyazaki and Takahata did work on them, they have slightly choppy animation, but the movements and the execution of what they can do is still great. You can tell it's a Miyazaki or a Takahata or a pre-Ghibli production. Like, you could see a lot of how the characters run, and it's like, they kind of move around like they were from like Lupin the Third or something. And considering that this was a production from TMS Entertainment, well, not a shock there, you know.
Yeah.
Very much like has little touches of like Lupin the Third and such, and how the characters move. And there's just not a whole lot of logic is made for these two specials. They are there for the charm and the whimsy of it all. And for an hour long runtime of both specials, I think they're both like 30 minutes each.
Yeah, ish.
Like, it's a quick, breezy time. You can own it right now on Blu-ray or rent it digitally or buy it digitally, I think through like Vudu and Amazon right now. So I don't know exactly when they will appear on a streaming service. I don't know which one they would go to.
I have a feeling it might go to HBO Max, since they have all the Ghibli movies there, but they also have like some of their other films like Night is Short, Walk on Girl,
Ride Your Wave, and Promare.
Yeah.
That makes absolute sense that it might go there, but it also might go to like Retro Crush or be on Amazon Prime, like how a lot of Discotheque re-releases are. So anyway, you do have ways to watch Panda Go Panda. I'm very happy that GKids re-released it. They enhanced the visuals of it. They gave it an English dub with some pretty recognizable actors in them. Like
they have a really good English cast for this.
Doug Stone, Simon Prescott, Kirk Thornton, Melissa Fawn, Barbara Goodson, Cody McKenzie, Cheryl Lynn, Mona Marshall. Like, a lot of the old school era voice actors are here. So Peter Spellos are there. You're in for a good time. So that's my recommendation. Panda Go Panda.
For my recommendation, you probably won't see these reviews for a while, but one of our future fresh takes, we're going through Violet Evergarden, which is just an incredible anime that came from Netflix back in 2018 from KyoAni. Probably one of the most beautiful pieces of media I've seen in quite a while. Fair warning though, it is very much a tearjerker, especially once you get to like episodes 9 and 10, which almost reduced us to puddles, because there's two revelations that like completely destroy our main character. And if you're into KyoAni's like gorgeous animation, then you should definitely check the show out.
KyoAni does a lot of great work. They're probably the one animation studio, or one of the very few, that are able to do their own work. Like they can pick whatever they want without having to worry about picking up other projects, which is what is crippling the anime industry right now, with so many studios picking up so many projects. And KyoAni is just like, we do what we want. That's what we're gonna do. And it works out for them. Yeah, I definitely need to give that one a watch. I've heard just nothing but great things. Reiko Yoshida does writing for the films and for the show. So that, that's always a good thing. And
oh yeah.
So I usually like to look forward to what KyoAni's doing. And I think they have a movie coming out this year. Don't know if it's coming out here in the States, but it's based off of one of their other shows that they're doing, or that they did in the previous years, where it was picked up by High Dive, or, Sentai Filmworks. Tsurune, which is an adaptation of the Tsurune Kazmai Koku Kyudobu series, which you can watch on High Dive, and it's great. It's, again, KyoAni is just one of those great studios that you always want to be on the lookout for. And next time, we're going to be talking about some utterly despicable little individuals. We're going to talk about the entire Despicable Me franchise, including the new Minions, The Rise of Gru, which we are finally...
After so many years delayed.
This better be the best movie of the year, or else I'll...
or else I will criticize it profusely.
It just better be worth the hype. And we're going to have some guests on to talk about it. We're going to take a break because the next week we are recording this is going to be the 4th of July weekend. So we're going to take a little break, and then we'll come back in full force talking about everyone's least favorite part of the animation scene.
Look forward to that next time. But until then, Cameron, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at CamsEyeView. I run my own website called CamsEyeView.biz, where I review animated films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/CamsEyeView. If you like my work and want to support me, that's one way to do it.
And you guys can find me on Twitter at CaptainK42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/CoachK42. And you can find me in all the various Facebook groups just at my name. You can check out Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Twitter at Ren Pop Culture. We're also on YouTube, and you can find us on Podchaser and the Banana Meter. Listen to all of our podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. Need an escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.